Welcome to Real Estate of Mind, a Farbman Group podcast. Good morning and welcome to the show. I'm here this morning with Michael Kalil, the Chief Operating Officer of Farbman Group. Michael's been with the company for over 23 years now, but of course he started when he was about 10, so very young and still as handsome as ever. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Andy. Thank you. I appreciate the nice, kind intro, and it's a privilege to be on this morning.
So, Michael, obviously you've been with Farbman for many years. It wasn't your first stop. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Andy, out of college, first of all, I've got a undergrad and graduate degree in finance. And out of college, I actually went into banking, worked in commercial loans and workouts for approximately 5 years. I was introduced to Bert Farbman in 1993, and actually it was my father who introduced us. And I started shortly thereafter here at Farbman and started in property management. Started actually working on receivership accounts. It was during the savings and loan crisis, and moved over here, was working on workouts at the bank, and just switched hats and started doing receiverships. I've been fortunate enough here at Farbman where I've been given the opportunity to work in different departments and different facets of the company. Spent time, obviously, property management, as mentioned earlier, brokerage, development. Was then returned to property management and ran management for a few years before joining the executive team.
So there's very few areas where you haven't worked. You haven't been in accounting, but other than that, you've pretty much worked everywhere in the company.
That's correct, and obviously have worked very closely with accounting over the years, but there's probably a reason for that.
Absolutely. I think that finance background plays nicely into wanting to make sure the numbers are in check in every aspect of your job. Now, here's a little fun fact. When I first started, I don't know if you remember this, you were actually training David Farbman in property management. That was, I remember that vividly, that you were, one of my first days, you guys were sitting next to each other in a cube.
I remember it. You were in a cube across from us as our CAM analyst.
That's right.
And yes, I trained David. It was a very short training program, as he quickly elevated to other great things.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that was a fun time,
yes,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael, today it's your job is COO of Farbman. Tell me a little bit about what that entails, what you oversee.
Well, as you know, Andy, my responsibilities are somewhat diverse. Maybe not typical COO responsibilities in some aspects. I focus a lot on new business development, client relations, very active in overseeing the third-party services such as property management, medical real estate solutions, and director of brokerage. I also act as receiver and or agent for receiver on our receiverships. So
you mentioned receiverships, and you know, it's interesting with the Great Recession. It seemed like everybody got into the business of receivership. Suddenly, everyone was an expert in that. But truly, Farbman has been working on receiverships since its start, since the beginning of Farbman over 40 years ago. And you know, I think part of that is because Michigan has historically been ground zero for recessions. So we got into it as a natural part of our doing business in Michigan. But I'd like to have you talk to me a little bit about the climate of receiverships today, where it's been the last few years, and really, you know, how you would differentiate how we deal with receiverships, maybe versus some of the newcomers to that segment.
Happy to, and as you mentioned, you're right. We've been doing receiverships really for the 40 years that we've been in business. And as I mentioned earlier, when I came over in '93, that was towards the end of the savings and loan crisis, and immediately started working on several receiverships. And I think there's three reasons really why we are very active in that distressed asset space. And one is that we are experienced, and we have been doing it for many years. Again, going back to the savings and loan crisis in the 80s and the 90s. Secondly, you mentioned the cyclical nature of our economy. I think that has a lot to do with why we, on an ongoing basis, even in robust economies, we see receiverships when many other markets are not working in that field. And the third is our full service platform. I think it sets us up to really perform in the receivership field and repositioning, stabilizing assets. And again, when I talk about the full service platform, I'm referring to property management, brokerage, and construction. And we are very good at working as a team, problem solving, and very efficient and quality operators.
And I think that's a very good point with that. When we talk about the work we do, many times our clients come to us because, one, we can stabilize and shore up the asset when it comes to us. So we get our management team in, clearing out unnecessary expenses, putting the project back into whatever proper position it should be. We can lease up the property, and at the end of it, we many times sell the asset for our clients. And I think the one thing that differentiates us in many ways is we don't buy assets that we sell. And I think that's a very important differentiation.
Absolutely. That and typically many of the orders state clearly in the receivership order that the receiver is prohibited from buying. Now, doesn't stop some people from buying when it converts to REO, but we've always viewed that as a conflict of interest, and I think that serves our clients well. And I agree with you. It's the stabilization of management, and then the value add of our leasing team, and a very sophisticated disposition investment sales team that finishes the cycle. And it's one-stop shopping, single point of accountability, and a lot of the lenders and special servicers are looking for that. And on the receivership side, it's somewhat of an asset management role, and it's our fees are very competitive compared to what some other receivers charge. We do a flat fee. Again, we're charging market fees on the other services, and that's really the driving force.
Absolutely. Great. It's sometimes difficult to talk about receiverships and the changing economic climate without sounding like an alarmist or like we're, trying to say it's an extreme situation. But, clearly over the last several months, we've started to see a change again based on the increased volume of receivership opportunities we've received. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what you think that really means in the coming year?
Sure. Yeah, and you're right. It's interesting because despite the steady outlook of the real estate market and economy, and if you look at the CMBS defaults in 2015, which were down to just below 0.4%, and that was down from a little bit over 4% in 2010. There is a high volume of upcoming loan maturities in 2000. Well, I shouldn't say upcoming. It's taken place now in 2016, 2017. And there is approximately $250 billion of loans that will be maturing during that period of time. There is a lack of liquidity in the CMBS markets. New issuances in the CMBS market is not keeping up with the mature loans. And therefore it's creating, like I said, a lack of liquidity. There's also more conservative underwriting. Loan to values are somewhere between 70 and 75% versus 90 and even in some cases higher back in 05, 06, 07 when a lot of these loans were originated. So that's creating a problem with getting some of these loans refinanced And as a result, we've seen an uptick in receiverships. And it's been primarily on the maturity loan defaults, not payment defaults.
Right, so the lenders are taking the position. They're not kicking the can down the road any further. They're dealing with the maturity defaults head on right now, which may be a little
Correct.
different than we were seeing back in the Great Recession, where it was, let's see what's going to actually happen. And just for our listeners who aren't familiar with it, CMBS, commercial mortgage-backed securities, I think that's a very good answer on your part, and thank you.
Well, and the other thing we're seeing is it's really quality assets too. These are assets that well located. Rent rolls are fairly stable, need some work, but a very different product from what we experienced in 09 and 10 from a distressed perspective. We've seen a lot of retail, a lot of office, probably over 60% is those two categories. And I foresee that they will continue to be the type of product type that we see coming in the doors for receiverships.
And that's an interesting point, because when people think of distressed assets, they often think of dilapidated, rundown real estate. And in some, and what you're saying, most cases right now, we're seeing high quality real estate. It's just an event of loan maturity.
Absolutely.
So Michael, I'm going to hit you with the hardball questions now, because we're at that point in the interview where it's no more softballs. This is it.
I'm ready.
One of the things that I find when you're a leader of an organization, and you are one of the top leaders in this organization, day-to-day can drag you down dealing with issues, complaints, concerns, and yet you always seem very upbeat. None of that seems to get to you. What in your position gives you the energy and the optimism that you carry with you every day?
Well, it's difficult to single out a particular activity. I truly enjoy the diversity of my job, and I'm fortunate. I wake up in the mornings and I enjoy coming into work, and at the end of the day, I could be sitting in the office and I'm very content doing what I do, and that's a great feeling. I think the biggest reward that I receive from this job is deals with our full service platform, and when we're clicking on all cylinders and we have a success for a client that utilizes that platform, where we've got the entire team working together and maximizing value for assets, I think that's where I find the most energy and rewards with what I do.
That's fantastic. That's I think the great part about the business we're in is that when you can make a difference for your clients, when you can find a way to reposition their assets or find some differentiator for them, I think that is incredibly energetic and really exciting to do. You mentioned at the beginning of this that your job as COO may not always be traditional, and I think that's true of all of our executive team.
Yep.
And I think it really goes back to we made a definitive arrangement several years back while working with our strategic coach. That
I remember it well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we were going to each do the tasks that we're best suited for and that give us that energy. And it's kept us, I think, from stepping on each other's toes. It's kept us from being locked into something that maybe, doesn't allow us to get enjoyment from our jobs. And really, I think, has made a difference in all the services we provide to our clients and the atmosphere we create for our employees, because we've really carried that throughout the organization. So yours may not be a typical COO position. Mine may not be a typical position. Andy Farbman's may not. But collectively, we're all doing the things I think we should be doing.
I agree, Andy. And I remember that session with our coach. And you're right. And we've carried it forward and really maintained the roles that were discussed in that executive session.
Yeah, makes all the difference. And candidly, obviously, I've been here about 21 years now. You were always a mentor for me when I was starting out. You've been, a fantastic coworker and friend through the years. Looking forward to many more opportunities. I know our clients are as well.
Well, thanks, Andy. Mutual respect, and always enjoy working with you. Thank you.
Join us next time for another wonderful edition of Real Estate of Mind, a Farbman Group podcast.